Sarah Mitchell never imagined that a luxury apartment in Boston, her father's wedding gift, would become the stage for a marriage that felt more like a battlefield, where every dish left unwashed and every dollar demanded by her mother-in-law chipped away at the love she'd once held so dear. At 38, Sarah stood at a crossroads, reflecting on the decade that had brought her here, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken resentment and the echoes of a happiness that now felt like a distant dream. Born in Burlington, Vermont, Sarah had grown up as the only child of Dr. Thomas Harper and Dr. Evelyn Harper, two respected physicians who ran a well-regarded clinic in their tight-knit community. The Harper home was a haven of warmth, filled with the scent of Evelyn's lavender candles and the sound of Thomas's laughter as he recounted stories from his medical school days. Sarah was their pride and joy, a bright girl with a curious mind who'd spend hours in the clinic's small library, flipping through medical journals she couldn't yet understand. Her parents had hoped she'd follow in their footsteps, but Sarah's heart led her elsewhere. After graduating high school, she enrolled in the University of Vermont School of Pharmacy, a decision that disappointed Thomas and Evelyn at first. "We thought you'd be a doctor, sweetheart," Evelyn had said, her tone gentle but tinged with regret. Yet they respected her choice, their love unwavering, and cheered her on as she graduated with honors and secured a job at Horizon Labs, a leading pharmaceutical company in Boston. Sarah's life took a darker turn at 28, when Evelyn died in a car accident on a snowy Vermont evening. The loss shattered Sarah and Thomas, leaving them clinging to each other in their grief. Sarah would drive up to Burlington every weekend, sitting with her father in the now quiet house, the absence of Evelyn's laughter a gaping wound. During those difficult months, Nathan Carter entered her life like a lifeline. They'd met through a mutual friend at a charity event in Boston, where Nathan, a restaurant manager in the food and beverage industry, charmed her with his easy smile and quiet attentiveness. He'd listen for hours as Sarah poured out her sorrow, his hand steady on hers, his presence a balm to her broken heart. 2 years after Evelyn's passing, Nathan proposed on a crisp autumn evening in Boston Common, the city lights twinkling around them. "I want to build a life with you, Sarah," he'd said, slipping a modest ring onto her finger. Overwhelmed with joy, Sarah said yes, feeling the first stirrings of hope since her mother's death. When Sarah shared the news with Thomas, he was overjoyed. "I've heard how Nathan supported you through everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he clasped Nathan's hand. "Thank you, son. Please take care of my girl." Nathan stood tall, his expression earnest. "I'll make her happy, sir. I promise." Standing beside him, Sarah felt enveloped in a warmth she hadn't known since her mother's passing, her father's approval a blessing that made her future feel bright. The following week, they traveled to Albany, New York, to announce their engagement to Nathan's family. His mother, Linda Carter, a divorcee with a taste for flashy makeup and even flashier jewelry, greeted them at her cluttered suburban home. Linda's eyes raked over Sarah with a critical glint, her painted lips curling into a smirk. "Marriage, huh? She's your choice, Nathan? Isn't she a bit plain? And older than you? Wouldn't a younger, prettier girl be better?" Sarah's stomach twisted, her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but Nathan quickly interjected. "Mom, you know Horizon Labs, right? Sarah works there. Her father's a doctor with his own practice in Vermont." Sarah had hoped he'd defend her character, her kindness, her resilience, but instead, he highlighted her financial status, as if that were her greatest asset. Linda's demeanor shifted instantly, her smirk replaced by a calculating smile. "Oh, Nathan, why didn't you say so sooner? That changes everything. I approve of the marriage. Nice to meet you, Sarah." She extended a manicured hand, her grip cold despite the warmth in her voice. Nathan beamed, clearly relieved, but Sarah couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest like a stone. Was this what her marriage would be built on? Money, not love? As a wedding gift, Thomas surprised them with a luxury apartment in a high-rise building in downtown Boston, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the Charles River. "It's our new home, Nathan," Sarah said, her voice brimming with excitement as they toured the sleek, modern space. "Let's live here happily together." Nathan smiled, pulling her into a hug, and for a moment, Sarah believed they could be the happy couple she'd always envisioned. But the cracks in their marriage appeared almost immediately. Nathan, who'd lived with his parents until the wedding, proved utterly incapable of managing household responsibilities. He couldn't cook a meal to save his life, didn't know how to operate the washing machine, and showed no interest in learning. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink, laundry overflowed in the hamper, and garbage bags sat untouched by the door, waiting for Sarah to deal with them. She'd come home from long days at Horizon Labs, her mind buzzing with the complexities of her latest project, only to find the apartment in disarray. At first, she tried to be patient. They were newlyweds, after all, still adjusting to life together. But as the months wore on, her frustration grew. She'd spend her evenings cooking dinner, scrubbing pots, and folding laundry while Nathan lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone or watching sports. "I'll help next time," he'd say whenever she asked, but next time never came. By their first anniversary, Sarah was doing all the household chores, her days a blur of work and domestic duties. She decided to address it, hoping for a partnership. One evening, as they sat at the dining table over a meal she'd prepared, she gathered her courage. "Nathan, I'm overwhelmed," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I need us to share the chores. I can't do everything on my own." Nathan looked up from his plate, his expression a mix of annoyance and indifference. "I'm tired from work too, Sarah," he said, as if that settled the matter. "You're better at this stuff than I am, right? It's easier if you do it." His dismissal stung, but Sarah swallowed her anger, not wanting to ruin their anniversary. She nodded, forcing a smile, and went back to her meal, the weight of his words settling heavily on her shoulders. Nathan's mother, Linda, only added to the strain. Linda had peculiar ideas about what she deserved, and her demands began to surface early in Sarah and Nathan's marriage. For Mother's Day, Sarah carefully chose a quality scarf from a department store in Boston. Its soft fabric a deep shade of emerald that she thought Linda would love. She paired it with a bouquet of carnations and sent it to Albany with a heartfelt note. A few days later, Linda called, her voice dripping with disdain. "A scarf? From some no-name brand? It's absurd to send me something so cheap," she snapped. Sarah tried to explain its quality, but Linda cut her off. "I only wear luxury brands, dear. Next time, just send cash." Stunned, Sarah recounted the conversation to Nathan when he got home. She'd hoped for empathy, but he shrugged, his tone casual. "What's the big deal? Just do as she says." From then on, they began sending Linda money instead of gifts, each payment a silent surrender to her demands. By their 5th year of marriage, Linda's visits to their Boston apartment became a regular occurrence. She'd show up unannounced, her perfume overpowering, her arms laden with shopping bags from her latest spree. "I need a little help, Nathan," she'd say, her voice sugary sweet, and Nathan would hand over cash without a second thought. Sarah watched their savings dwindle, her frustration mounting. Nathan's income as a restaurant manager was modest, and though Sarah earned significantly more at Horizon Labs, they were barely scraping by. She had to dip into their joint savings to cover living expenses, each withdrawal a painful reminder of Linda's greed and Nathan's complicity. Sarah tried to reason with him, her voice tight with worry. "Nathan, we can't keep giving her money like this. We're struggling to pay our bills." But Nathan would only smile, patting her hand as if she were a child. "She's my mom, Sarah. She's important to me. You'll understand one day." Sarah wanted to believe in the man she'd married, the one who'd held her through her grief and promised her father he'd make her happy. But as the years passed, that man seemed to fade, replaced by someone who saw her as a maid, a breadwinner, a means to an end. The luxury apartment in Boston, once a symbol of their new beginning, now felt like a gilded cage, its walls echoing with the unspoken tension of a marriage built on unease. Sarah didn't know it yet, but the real storm was still to come, one that would test her strength and force her to confront the true cost of the life she'd chosen. Sarah Mitchell's world, already strained by an unequal marriage, began to crumble entirely in the 8th year of her union with Nathan Carter, when a single phone call from her father, Dr. Thomas Harper, shattered the fragile balance she'd fought so hard to maintain. "Sarah, I need to see you," Thomas had said, his voice heavy with a gravity she hadn't heard since her mother's death. She drove to Burlington, Vermont, that weekend, her heart pounding with dread, and found her father sitting in his study, his once robust frame diminished by illness. "It's terminal cancer," he told her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Treatment isn't an option anymore." Sarah's knees buckled, and she sank into the chair beside him, tears streaming down her face. Thomas reached for her, stroking her head as he had when she was a child. "This is fate, Sarah. Let's accept it," he said softly, but his words couldn't ease the ache in her chest. The months that followed were a grueling juggling act for Sarah. Her days became a blur of work at Horizon Labs, household chores that Nathan still refused to share, and long drives to Burlington to care for her father in the hospital. Thomas's condition deteriorated rapidly, his skin growing pale, his breaths more labored with each visit. Sarah would sit by his bedside for hours, holding his hand, reading him passages from his favorite medical journals, or simply listening as he reminisced about her childhood. Nathan, however, offered no support. When Sarah told him she'd be spending more time with her father, he barely looked up from his phone. "That's tough, Sarah. Do your best," he said, his tone devoid of empathy. He visited the hospital only once, staying for less than an hour before claiming he had a work emergency. Sarah was too consumed with her father's care to dwell on Nathan's indifference, but the weight of his absence added to her growing exhaustion. One evening, as Thomas lay in his hospital bed, his voice weak but steady, he turned to Sarah with a question that cut through her haze of grief. "How's your marriage with Nathan going?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Sarah hesitated, her mind flashing to Nathan's careless attitude, Linda's endless demands for money, and the years of resentment she'd buried deep. She couldn't find the words to answer, her silence speaking volumes. Thomas squeezed her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "You don't have to endure, Sarah," he said. "Think about your happiness. You won't face hardship after I'm gone." The promise in his words brought fresh tears to her eyes, and she wept openly, her father holding her hand in quiet strength. She knew he was trying to protect her, even as he faced his own mortality. 3 months later, Thomas passed away quietly in the night. Sarah was engulfed in sorrow, her heart breaking anew as she arranged the funeral alone. Nathan showed no interest in helping, leaving her to manage every detail, from the eulogy to the guest list, while he stayed home, claiming he was too busy with work he'd long since stopped caring about. The funeral was a heartfelt farewell, attended by many friends, colleagues, and patients who'd loved Dr. Thomas Harper. Even Nathan and Linda attended, though their presence felt performative, their condolences hollow. Sarah stood by her father's grave, clutching a single white rose, and whispered a final goodbye, her tears mixing with the rain that began to fall. The day after the funeral, a lawyer contacted Sarah about her father's estate. She met with him in Burlington, still numb from grief, and listened as he explained the details. After taxes, Thomas had left her over $3 million, a fortune amassed from his medical practice and savvy real estate investments. Sarah sat in stunned silence, her hands trembling as she signed the necessary documents. She was grateful for her father's foresight, but the weight of handling such a sum felt overwhelming. Returning to Boston, she spread the inheritance papers on her desk in the apartment, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. Exhausted from the emotional toll of the past months, she dozed off on the sofa, the documents still scattered around her. She awoke to the sound of cheerful voices, Nathan and Linda, standing in the living room, their excitement palpable. "Sarah, well done," Nathan said, his eyes gleaming as he held the inheritance papers in his hands. Sarah's heart sank, anger surging through her. "Don't read those without permission," she snapped, her voice shaking with indignation. But Linda, unconcerned, clapped her hands together. "Wow, $3 million. We can live comfortably forever," she exclaimed, her tone dripping with greed. Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "I've decided we'll split it between me and Mom," he announced, as if the decision were his to make. Sarah's mind reeled. It was right after her father's funeral, and they were already plotting to claim his legacy. Then Nathan sneered, his words cutting deep. "I can finally quit my job. I have to thank that decrepit old man." "Are you talking about my dad?" Sarah blurted out, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and rage. Nathan ignored her, turning to Linda to discuss their plans. "We'll buy a new car, go shopping, maybe even take a trip," he said, his excitement growing. Linda nodded eagerly, her eyes alight with anticipation. Sarah stood frozen, her emotions a storm she could no longer contain. She was on the brink of exploding, burdened by years of household chores, drained by their constant financial demands, and now hearing her father insulted in the cruelest way. The betrayal was a knife in her heart, twisting with every word they spoke. Yet she knew she couldn't let them see her break. Suppressing her anger, she forced a smile, her voice eerily calm. "Sure, use the money as you please," she said, her words a calculated facade. Inside, her resolve was hardening. This was her breaking point, and she wouldn't let them take her father's legacy, or her dignity, without a fight. Sarah Mitchell stood in the doorway of her Boston apartment, watching Nathan Carter and his mother Linda disappear down the hall, their voices echoing with frustration as they realized the locks had been changed. It was a moment of quiet victory, the first step in reclaiming her life after years of enduring their selfishness. Sarah had reached a breaking point, and now, with her father's $3 million inheritance as her shield, she was ready to fight for the happiness Thomas Harper had urged her to seek. The days following her father's funeral had been a whirlwind of betrayal. Nathan had quit his job as a restaurant manager the moment he learned of the inheritance, assuming the money would flow into their joint account. He and Linda began spending lavishly, treating Sarah's $100,000 savings like their personal piggy bank. They'd withdraw thousands at a time, returning home with luxury brand bags, designer clothes, and reservations at 3-star restaurants, all while Sarah continued to bear the burden of household chores. "The 3-star place we went to today wasn't even that good," Linda had complained one evening, her tone dripping with entitlement. Nathan nodded, adding, "Yeah, a bit underwhelming for sophisticated people like us." Their arrogance was staggering, and Sarah, treated more like a maid than a wife, felt her resentment boil over. When she protested their spending, Nathan laughed her off. "What's the big deal? The $3 million is coming soon." "This is nothing," he'd said, his dismissal a final straw. While Nathan and Linda jetted off for a week-long trip to Hawaii, without inviting Sarah, she took action. Alone in the apartment, she hired a locksmith to change the locks, packed their belongings into boxes, and consulted a divorce lawyer. She also transferred the remaining $50,000 from their joint account to her own, knowing it would be part of the marital property division. Her father's inheritance, however, was legally hers alone, a fact she'd confirmed with the lawyer. When Nathan and Linda returned, tanned and dressed in aloha shirts, they pounded on the door, furious. "Why won't the door open?" Nathan shouted through the intercom. Sarah's voice was calm, resolute. "I changed the locks. Let's talk at the cafe nearby." At the cafe, Sarah sat across from Nathan and Linda, their faces a mix of confusion and anger. Nathan demanded the new keys, but Sarah slid a divorce petition across the table instead. "Divorce?" Nathan stammered, his eyes wide. Linda gasped. "Why, Sarah? What's this about?" Sarah's gaze was steady, her voice firm. "You've been spending recklessly. Are you sure your finances are okay?" Nathan smirked, his confidence unshaken. "Of course. Your father's inheritance is coming. There's still $50,000 in our joint account. Look." He opened his banking app, and his smirk vanished. "Why is the money gone?" he demanded, his voice rising. "I moved the $50,000 to my account as part of the property division," Sarah explained, her tone unwavering. "And the inheritance? It's not marital property. It's mine alone." Nathan's face paled as he frantically searched online, Linda peering over his shoulder. The legal articles confirmed Sarah's words. Inherited property isn't subject to division in a divorce. Nathan's bravado crumbled, and he turned to pleading. "Sarah, please don't divorce me. I have no savings, no job. How will I live? Linda's expression mirrored his panic, her earlier arrogance replaced by fear. But Sarah was done. Take responsibility for your actions, she said, her voice cold. I'll never forget how you treated me, how you insulted my father. I'm done. I'll go to court if I have to. Intimidated by her fierce resolve, Nathan and Linda shrank back, their protests reduced to whimpers. The divorce proceedings were swift. The $50,000 was recognized as marital property, but the $3 million inheritance remained Sarah's. Nathan and Linda, having squandered their funds on their Hawaii trip and luxury purchases, were left penniless. Credit card bills from their lavish spending piled up, forcing them to take on more debt. They now lived in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of Albany, working grueling jobs to pay off their creditors. The stark contrast to their former lifestyle was a harsh lesson in the consequences of their greed. Sarah, meanwhile, sold the Boston condo she'd shared with Nathan, its memories too tainted to keep. With the proceeds and her inheritance, she moved into her father's apartment in Burlington, a cozy space filled with reminders of his love, his old medical books on the shelves, a photo of the three of them on the mantel. She continued her work at Horizon Labs, her career a source of pride, but now she had the financial security to live on her terms. She'd wake each morning to the sight of Lake Champlain through her window, the crisp Vermont air a balm to her soul. She'd sip her coffee, gratitude for her father's foresight warming her heart, and plan her day with a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. One sunny afternoon, Sarah walked through Burlington's Church Street marketplace, the cobblestone path bustling with locals and tourists. She stopped at a small cafe, ordering a latte, and sat at an outdoor table, watching the world go by. For the first time in a long time, she felt light, unburdened by the weight of a failing marriage or the demands of others. She thought of her father's words, "Think about your happiness," and smiled. She'd honored his wish, not just by securing her future, but by rediscovering her own strength. Sarah Mitchell was no longer the overburdened wife or the grieving daughter. She was a woman reborn, ready to cherish the life ahead, her days filled with the promise of peace and the joy of living on her own terms.